Don't I have that too?
I don't waste breath on an enemy. No room for negative energy. Nah, nah, nah. I hear them talking, don't get to me. Karma gon' catch up eventually.
Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Nah, nah, nah. I hear them talking, don't get to me. Karma gon' catch up eventually. Ha, ha, ha.
I'm recording my screen now. Alright, perfect. Alright, everybody, welcome in to Load the Box. I am your host, as always, Jordan Hawthorne. I am joined, as always, by the wonderful and the marvelous Jack Day. Jack, we already did a show this week, so it's a little different. It's not a full week gap in between the times that we've talked, but how has your Sunday night to Wednesday night been?
Yeah, it's been eventful. The Twins have been playing some good baseball, and they are they're a half game out of the AL Central now. I forgot to text you even about this, but a little fun series between you and I. We don't really get that competitive edge other than the fantasy side of things for us, but the Twins play the Reds this weekend, so that'll be a little bit of a rivalry between the two of us. But Twins are already in the playoffs, so I'm looking forward to some playoff baseball. Not quite sure we're going to see any playoff football this year for the Vikings. Like I do have my face shirt on, my K-Fan face shirt, and I mustered up enough courage to put the Vikings hat on again. But it's going to be another interesting and long Sunday, in my opinion. I think it's going to be really tough. We don't have Anthony Barr. He was placed on IR. He's out for the season. And it's going to be, I mean, the defensive line has been very poor as well. So it's going to be very difficult to stop a guy like Derrick Henry, and I just don't have a good outlook heading into this Sunday.
Yeah, if you gave me the over-under for, like, Derrick Henry rushing yards was, like, 200, I'd think about it before I bet it. Like, it wouldn't be as easy as it's like, oh, of course not. The Vikings, really, since 2017, we've been pretty weak against the run, and I love everyone's take about this game. Everyone is on Twitter and, on shows and just talking about it all the time, about how the Titans are the team that Mike Zimmer wants the Vikings to be. And it's painfully accurate. They run the ball. They play ball control. They have a quarterback that does just enough to not lose, but can also win. They really are they're the perfect Mike Zimmer team. And unfortunately, Mike Zimmer has created the Vikings, who looked like they were going to be in the race for Trevor Lawrence the last 2 weeks. So a little bit of a spoiler there. We'll get into that a little later. But, Jack, I know you're going to go over some Vikings news here in just a second. But before you do that, I'm going to give a huge shout-out to Chase Dreams, who makes the music here at Load the Box. And then I'm also going to direct you to maybe the best Twitter page in all of Vikings Twitter history, and that is the Load the Box Twitter page. Go ahead and give us a follow at LTB Vikings. One more time, that is at LTB Vikings. You can follow myself on Twitter at jhawthorne16. One more time, jhawthorne with no E and then 16. And then you can follow Jack on Twitter at Jack_H_day. One more time, and I'm going to stick with what I said on the Colts post-game show. That is Jack_H, as in how are the Vikings this bad, _day. So, Jack, what's I think the big Vikings news is a free agent signing, but what else do you got for us? And of course, go over that as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's official yet for this one, but it sounds like Todd Davis is in the process of going through his COVID testing to become the next linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, and we can kind of bounce that right into the injury report because, like I said earlier, Anthony Barr was placed on the IR, and he is done for the season. I think I said this in the Colts show, but I had him. I predicted him as one of my game balls, so I should probably just stop picking game balls altogether because apparently I'm a curse to this team. But the injury report is not looking very good for the Vikings either. Cameron Dantzler did not practice today. Mike Hughes showed up on the injury report, did not practice with a neck injury, which something to keep an eye on because obviously he went down with that neck injury towards the end of last season, and if that's something that's reoccurring, I don't think that that could be something that just to keep an eye on throughout the remainder of his career, because obviously neck injuries can be very serious. Running back Mike Boone has a concussion. He did not practice. Riley Reif was limited. And then Troy Dye, rookie linebacker out of Oregon, has a foot injury, and he did not practice either. So not only are we already thin along our defensive line, we're very thin in the secondary. Now we're also thin in the linebackers room as well. So it's kind of, like I said earlier, it's going to be, I think, interesting is the best way to describe this coming game. But the Titans have some guys on the injury report as well. A.J. Brown did not practice. He's a stud. When I was writing for the Titans Wire, that's kind of how I got started back right into football again. I wrote a piece on him kind of saying that the Titans got an absolute stud in the draft. I think he was a second-round pick, and I still think he's an absolute stud. So that could work in our favor if he doesn't end up playing. Malcolm Butler did not practice. Chris Jackson did not practice. Dennis Kelly did not practice. Derek Robertson did not practice due to an illness. And Jonnu Smith, their very gifted, athletically gifted tight end, has an ankle injury, and he did not practice either. So they have a long injury report as well, but I think the Vikings, we're just hurting in so many different areas that it's going to be a rough Sunday in my opinion, and we can get to that as the show goes on, but this injury report, it's not looking good for the Vikings.
Yeah, it's oh man. I'm going to try not to be all doom and gloom the entire show, because I don't want to have 16 straight weeks of, the Vikings suck, we're so bad, fire Mike Zimmer, trade Cousins, give me Trevor Lawrence or Trey Lance or Justin Fields, all these guys. Like, I will, actually give my opinion on the game, but I don't know. This is odd because we're only like 6 minutes into this show, and we're already like talking about the Titans. Usually we don't talk about the Titans until we're half an hour deep of talking about the game before and talking about a whole bunch of different stuff. So, do we jump into game balls first, or do you want to do fantasy or gambling? We really didn't go over this before the show. We probably should have. Yeah,
we can kind of touch on some matchups. Excuse me. Sorry if I sound a little off too. I've been battling allergies for the last couple weeks.
COVID.
The weather here in Minnesota, yeah, the weather keeps flipping back and forth here, and I think that has something to do with it. But I have a couple notes here. First and foremost, how are we going to stop Derrick Henry? I don't think it's possible. I know you're going to want to touch on that as well. Derrick Henry is a physical freak, and he is not an easy player to bring to the ground. And the Vikings, Eric Wilson did not look spectacular against the Colts. Like I said, Anthony Barr is out now. Troy Dye is not practicing. It's going to be he's already a very hard running back to bring to the ground. And I think now with the limited linebackers we have on our roster and the literally zero to no push that we're getting from our defensive line, it's going to be very difficult to bring a guy like Derrick Henry to the ground.
Yeah, I agree with you. Derrick Henry, he's been one of my favorite running backs since he came into the league, and I know he really didn't blow up and have great success until I think really last year was the first year when he was like the guy, and everybody kind of respected him as maybe the best running back in the NFL. But I remember I drafted him high in fantasy pretty much every season up until last season, because he would come on really strong at the end of the year, where the Titans would they'd try and throw the ball with Mariota and they wouldn't really get him involved, and they always had another running back. Like Dion Lewis was stealing carries from him. And then finally, week 15, they'd be like, oh yeah, Derrick Henry is an insane running back. He's, fast as hell. He's built bigger than most linebackers, and he's just a tough guy. And he would go in and, he'd get me like 1 million fantasy points. Then finally I was like, well, I'm not going to do it because he's good for the playoffs, but I got to make the playoffs first, and I let him fall, and then I didn't get him last year, but I did pick him up this year. So selfishly, because I'm already kind of abandoning hope for this season, I'm hoping Derrick Henry does have a big day, because I'd like to win. I haven't won a fantasy game yet this season. I'm 0-2, and it doesn't feel good. So, but like you said, stopping him, it involves, you have to hit him in the backfield, and you have to be able to, swarm the ball, which the Vikings are young. I think Tennessee's going to get creative with the offense a little bit. I think it's not going to be as simple as just line up with a fullback and Derrick Henry and give him the ball and let him do his thing, because I do think we might be able to stop that. But I think they'll get a little creative. I think he'll work in the screen game, and they'll throw some misdirection at these young defensive backs. And they're going to make our young defense look young, I think. And I think it's going to be the third week in a row where everybody takes to Twitter to say, oh, fiddlesticks, we're so bad because we're so young and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's going to jump off the ship. And I think now that I'm kind of ready for this, I think I'll be able to break down the game a little bit more rather than just the feeling of despair and anger that I have towards the team. So I think this year I'm going to be able to grow in that sense. But Derrick Henry, like you said, monster of a man. A.J. Brown gets overlooked. That DK Metcalf picture.
Agreed.
The DK Metcalf picture where, he looks all jacked. I'm pretty sure A.J. Brown is in that picture as well as Alexander Madison, and they all look like absolutely, they're studs. They are all studs. Madison is good, doesn't get playing time because of Dalvin Cook, but A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf do, and I think they're two of, the young best wide receivers in the league, and I'm really looking forward to it. One last thing I'm looking forward to, Ryan Tannehill slowly becoming the most underrated player in the NFL. He threw for 4 touchdowns this past week. He has A.J. Brown. He can, work in the screen game. He's a veteran in the sense that he's smart. And I think him getting distanced from Adam Gase has been the best thing for his NFL career. And I think he's going to develop into I called Andy Dalton Cousins light once. And I think Cousins is like Ryan Tannehill light because I think he's going to be a little bit better than Cousins is, and I'm excited to see Tannehill play because I've always been a big fan of his.
Yeah, and I think Jonnu Smith is another guy. He's just, this team is filled with athletic specimens, and we haven't even brought up Jadeveon Clowney, big offseason sign that they had as well. So I'm curious to see how our offensive line holds up against him. I think he's a guy that's been up and down. Really, whenever you bring up the name Jadeveon Clowney, it's just that one game, I think it was against Michigan in college, where he absolutely annihilated that guy, and I don't think we haven't really seen – he had so much buzz around him, and he's battled some injuries, I know, but I don't think we've ever seen that. I still think he has that elite pass rushing ability, but obviously the Vikings' offensive line has not been great either, so that could be a matchup to watch. Heading into the season, I'm almost positive I had this game circled as a win for the Vikings, and I think I had a total win-loss record of it. I think it was 10-6 or 11-5. Obviously, that has changed since then. It's just the Titans are one of those teams where they're just like a sneaky good football team. I think that's the best way to describe them. They have so many good players scattered throughout their team. And I think people forget how much they dominated the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs last year. No one was expecting that. They came in and absolutely shut them down. They shut Lamar Jackson down in that high-powered offense that they've been running. And they just utilized Derrick Henry. And then they made it they made it a game against the Chiefs as well. Obviously, the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl. But they made it to the AFC Championship game last year. And I think, it's not something that people forget. But it just the Titans are a weird team in that way where it's like, I think they get overlooked a little bit, and they have so much talent on that roster. And like you said, I really agree with you. If A.J. Brown is able to play, he is a very good wide receiver. I would say he's borderline top 10, top 15 wide receiver in the league. And I think, Corey Davis has had his ups and downs. He was a first-round pick, if I'm remembering correctly, and he hasn't been – actually, I think he was a really early first-round pick, if I'm remembering correctly, and he hasn't really lived up to the hype, but he's still another talented wide receiver. So they have weapons to go up against our really banged-up defense, and that scares me. So I'm just looking through my notes here. Kind of the final thing I had written down is if the Vikings want to get to 1-2, the biggest thing they need to do is just stop shooting themselves in the foot. They've been killing themselves with penalties and just stupid plays and turning the ball over. And it's kind of going back to what you said, that this does not look like a Mike Zimmer-led team. It's not similar to what we've seen since he got here in 2014. And like what you said, and I think Wabi actually wrote an article very similar to this on Vikings territory, the Tennessee Titans look exactly like a team that would be led by Mike Zimmer. They're able to establish the run and set up that play action for Ryan Tannehill, get him outside the pocket, and then utilize their outside weapons and let him serve in the field, just because that run game with Derrick Henry, it opens up the field so much. And I think that's something that we should be able to do with Dalvin Cook, but obviously we haven't even been on the field long enough to establish a solid run game yet this year. So I don't have super high expectations for this one. Obviously, this is a game where I think having a full U.S. Bank Stadium would help out a ton, but it's going to be another game with 0 fans in attendance. So I think this is another one of those games where the Vikings fans are just gonna have to buckle up and take one to the chin, because I think that's what Derrick Henry is gonna do to this Vikings defense.
Yeah, Derrick Henry he's a scary man. He's a very good football player, and I mean he's fun to watch. If you can take yourself out of being a Vikings fan, like he's a great running back. And this sounds like this is such a weird thing for me to say, because I'm usually the last person that's like, well, just enjoy the spirit of the game and everything's gonna be fine. But like Derrick Henry's really good at football. Like enjoy watching him, because we only get to play him once every blue moon around here, with them being in the AFC. So like you said, not high hopes, but I think we're going to move into your area of expertise now and talk about some fantasy football, and then we'll move more into mine and talk about some gambling. I hit on my bets this week, by the way. I think I don't know if I announced it on the show, but I was like watching. I didn't have like the game on while we were doing our show on Sunday, but I was watching like the StatCast or whatever that ESPN Fantasy has, because I was like, the Chiefs need to win this game. I had like a 5-team parlay with the Chiefs, and I was like, if Justin Herbert knocks me out of a 5-team parlay, like money on this game, like everybody in my family had money on this game, and we're all sitting there. And then as soon as they kick it, I'm in the middle of doing a damn podcast, and I'm getting calls from everybody in my family like, we just won. But, it is what it is. So, Jack, I'm going to handicap you and say no Derrick Henry. Who do you want to stout in Sunday's game? And I might even handicap you and say you can't do Tennessee's defense, because they're probably going to get a safety.
Yeah, that's a fair assumption. Obviously, it happened back-to-back weeks. But it's kind of hard looking at the injury report right now, just because I don't fully know who's going to play. I think if A.J. Brown is healthy, he is a must-play. I think, if I'm remembering correctly as well, I was doing a little bit of DraftKings research with my dad last weekend before the game, and I had Jonnu Smith in one of my lineups, and I ended up taking him out and went even cheaper, which I should not have done, because I think he scored at least – I know he scored at least once, and I want to say he scored 2 touchdowns last Sunday, but I'm not 100% sure. So obviously, the matchup with Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith, you would think that they'd be able to lock them down, but I think their heads are in different places as well, trying to make sure that these young cornerbacks are lining up in places where they need to be. The linebacking core obviously is not what it's normally at, and the defensive line is also not what it's normally at. There's struggles on all 3 phases of this defense, so that scares me a little bit. I think you can honestly, I would say Ryan Tannehill is another solid play. I don't think he, especially if you're looking at like a DraftKings stack, I would imagine he wouldn't be super expensive. I don't think he would be super high owned either. So with what we saw Aaron Rodgers do, and I mean Phillip Rivers had a couple nice throws against us as well, I wouldn't be opposed to starting him. Switching over to the Vikings side, I mean, Delvin is a must-play. Obviously, if you have Adam Thielen, you're going to play him as well. But I just wrote an article for K-Fan this afternoon actually, saying the Vikings have to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers more frequently if they want to start winning games in 2020. We haven't seen, I mean, when you're not getting Delvin Cook the ball until the fourth quarter, what are you doing? Why do you even go out and give him the money then? Why do you pay him if you're not going to give him the ball? Utilize these guys. We have so much talent on the offense, and it's not being utilized. Irv Smith Jr., another prime example. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say I'm ready to start Irv Smith Jr. in a fantasy matchup right now, but where in the hell has he been? We're not utilizing him. In the article I wrote, we had Irv Smith Jr., Kyle Rudolph, and Delvin Cook. I think they've combined for 7 catches and 48 yards through 2 games. Remember last year, the screen games that we would get set up with Delvin Cook, we'd get some tight end screen passes. We would utilize those guys. We're not utilizing Justin Jefferson enough. That was kind of the headline of the article that I wrote, that it's Justin Jefferson time in Minnesota. He had a press conference today, and he said he's ready. He said these cornerbacks have not, essentially, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he's not scared of the cornerbacks that he's seen in the NFL. He played in the SEC. He's used to going up against great competition. Get the ball in his hands. He led the Vikings in receiving last week. We saw him get open on several occasions and not get the ball. He's very fun to watch with Yak as well. He can make people miss with his legs. So I want to say Justin Jefferson is a really deep fantasy sleeper this week, but I'm just not really ready to commit to this Vikings offense in a fantasy world right now. It's a hard thing to say because I think we have so much talent on this offense, but it's just not currently being used properly.
Yeah, to answer your question, by the way, about Irv Smith and where he's been at, I think he had 2 or 3 drops last week, and granted, some of them were tough catches. One of them was over the middle, and he got drilled, but still, like, it's the NFL, damn it, and if you touch the ball, you got to catch it. Like, that's just how it is. So, I took Irv Smith as my, like, I was planning on him being my number 1 tight end, and then I got cold feet, and I took Noah Fant, and even though I'm 0-2, thank God I took Noah Fant, or I might not even have, like, topped 100 the last 2 weeks. So, I agree with you. I think you made some really good points about the Vikings offense and how it's difficult to trust them. And, you know, I made a joke last week just at my parents' house watching the game about how, well, you know, the Vikings, like, offense is actually pretty good in fantasy because, you know, Cousins will throw for about $125 on a bad day, and then he'll pad his stats, and he'll end up with 300 yards and 2 touchdowns somehow from out of nowhere just in garbage time. And I think last week even we saw, like, the offense just, like, I think Dalvin got a late touchdown, kind of a garbage backdoor touchdown or something. But, like, this Vikings offense, looks very ugly, and it needs to be addressed. And like you said, get Jefferson the ball. I think he's kind of the key to turning it around.
Yeah, and I completely just spaced on what I was going to say there. There was something I was going to say, but I completely forgot. But, yeah, Jefferson is just one of those guys, like, you go out, and we saw it with Stephon Diggs when the Vikings drafted him in 2015. Obviously, it's a little bit different circumstances because Diggs was the 5th-round pick. Obviously, he had a lot of talent, and this is kind of what I used to start my article. And this, if you're a Vikings fan, this might be a hard pill to swallow right now, but Stephon Diggs is currently leading the NFL in receiving yards at 239 yards. I don't have the number in front of me, but the Vikings only have like 100 more total receiving yards on their roster right now than Stephon Diggs has by himself. So I want to see a guy like Justin Jefferson just get those reps. We've seen B.C. Johnson. I mean, there's a lot of buzz with him throughout training camp, but we never really saw him get to that next level last year, and we haven't seen it in games this year. And if you can go be a star in practice, that's a lot different than going out and being a star on Sundays. So I'm ready to hand the keys over to Justin Jefferson in that wide receiver 2 role. We've seen some good plays from him, but like I said earlier, we just haven't seen – he hasn't gotten the chance really to prove if he was worth that first-round pick or not, which I'm still very high on Justin Jefferson. I think he's a very talented player. I just want to see our coaching staff utilize him a little bit more.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, you know, obviously this week in fantasy, I'll come in as the 0-2 guy, and I'll give the obvious advice: stout Derrick Henry, because he's very good at football.
That's why you didn't want me to have that. You wanted to steal some of the thunder.
A little bit. I definitely needed to. Jack, I need a win, man. The Vikings are 0-2. I'm 0-2. I only hit on one bet this year so far. It's a down football season for me, and I'm not looking forward to it. Not to mention the Reds are probably going to miss out on the playoffs this year. And then also in my backdrop, I've got a Columbus Blue Jackets jersey, and we got our asses handed to us by Tampa Bay. So it's a bad year for, you know, playing games for me right now. I had to go to Five Below and buy a tabletop curling set, you know, like with the little booms and the stones. And I lost to my fiance in that. So it's an overall bad time. But I do want to introduce a little bit of a segment this week, and I think we should start working on a segment for fantasy as well. Well, because we have this extra time, where we're not just we're not talking about like the Colts game and the Titans game and trying to cram it into half an hour. Because we have this little bit of extra time, we can explore the rest of the NFL, and this is the perfect year to do it, in my opinion, because we're not very good at football anymore. So maybe boost viewership, we'll talk about a couple of other teams. So I'm going to talk about gambling. If you want to think about like 3 guys just around the league that you think could be like sleeper daily fantasy plays, it doesn't have to be a year-long thing. It could be a cheap guy on DraftKings. I meant to warn you about this earlier, and then I forgot, and then I pulled up my gambling website and just completely I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I wanted to do this tonight. So that's my fault. I'm sorry if I've upset you, but
no, you're good, man.
I want to talk about so every week I do an underdog parlay where I pick 3 underdogs to just straight up win a football game, and I feel pretty good about it this week because I've got the Cincinnati Bengals upsetting Philadelphia because Philadelphia is bad at football and Cincinnati has looked good against, I think, pretty good teams in Cleveland and Los Angeles. I've got the Rams over the Bills. It's an underdog parlay. You kind of got to give me some wiggle room here because I'm picking them just to straight up win. And this is a game where I do think Buffalo, if Josh Allen has an off day and he starts overthrowing Diggs, the Rams have looked pretty good. I think they can control the ball. And their defense hasn't looked too shabby. So the Rams over Buffalo. And then the third team in the parlay is Las Vegas in New England, taking that game. This is all money line. This isn't spreads or anything. This is just picking them straight up to win. I think there's a good chance you win that. You could win a few $100 on a pretty cheap bet. Again, bet safe, bet legally, and if you have a gambling addiction, contact your local helpline. Have to throw it out there. We're a sponsored program now. I got to do it for the kids, but those are my three teams this week. And then looking at the Vikings against the spread, I almost. And this might get a little graphic. I almost pissed my pants when I checked the spread on this game, and it was only 2.5 points. The fact that the Vikings are 2.5 point dogs to Tennessee is an outrage. I won't stand for it, and I will gladly take Tennessee at -2.5 because I firmly believe they will beat us by at least 20. So, Jack,
wow.
Not actually 20. Not actually. That's more of me just being exaggeratory, but I think they'll beat us by a field goal at least. I mean, they're going to control the ball. I think our defense is going to be on the field a lot more than our offense for the third week in a row, and I'm kind of getting into the later part of the show. But, yeah, give me the Titans at -2.5, and then the over-under is 48. I think I would take the under because both of these teams want to run the ball, and that's kind of what happens when you run the ball. You don't score a lot of points. So, Jack, I'll pass it to you. If you want to touch on any gambling things, feel free to, but you're definitely, I feel like you're more of a fantasy guy, so I want to give you the flow.
For sure. I'm definitely more of a fantasy guy. And I just looked at a couple quick things here because you kind of put me on the spot a little bit. But I'm going to pick one guy where I can tie this into DraftKings. I can tie it into your FanDuel lineups. I can tie it into your waiver wires as well because he's a guy that I picked up in one of my leagues. And on top of all of it, he has a Vikings connection as well. Player that I would highly recommend picking up, at least for this week, maybe a couple weeks, depending on how long Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman are hurt. They're both doubtful to play this weekend. Our old friend, Jerick the Jet McKinnon.
Oh, no.
Pick him up, especially in a PPR league. He's going to be getting, in my opinion, I think he's going to see the ball very frequently this week. I think he's one of the only running backs. I know they were bringing in some other running backs for workouts, but he's a guy that he could legitimately have 6 to 8 catches, and that right there, I mean, he gets 6 catches for 50 yards. That's 11 points. He sneaks in the end zone once. You're sitting pretty good with a guy who I think I just saw he was like $4,900 in DraftKings. He was he was on the waiver wire for me in one of my leagues. I know I'm in some pretty deep leagues as well, so he wasn't in some of the other ones. But if you're in one of those leagues with some of your buddies where it's not a keeper league and you don't have as deep of a bench, definitely probably not a dynasty league either, but in a league like the one that Jordan and myself are in, I don't even know if I checked in that league, but there's a very good chance that a guy like McKinnon is still available. And I'm just going to put it all out there. I loved McKinnon when he was with the Vikings. It kind of sucked to see him leave. When he did that Dirty Bird dance in Atlanta, I think that's one of my favorite memories of him.
That's the first thing I thought of whenever you brought him up.
My buddy, I tweeted about him recently this week because I just tweeted out he was an athletic freak coming out of college. I mean, he was in above the 90th percentile in all the categories, and his most comparable athlete coming out of college is LaDainian Tomlinson, and that's some pretty high praise. So on top of being super athletic, he's very strong as well. I think he led the running back class his rookie year in the bench press reps as well. So he's a guy that I'll always cheer for. He's battled several injuries throughout his career, and he has ties to Minnesota, obviously. Him and Latavius Murray, when Dalvin Cook went down that year, it kind of sucked, but at the same time, it kind of blossomed another duo here in Minnesota. Obviously, Latavius is playing for the Saints now, but those two were a very fun pair to watch, and that was the year I was interning for the team as well. And I think I can't remember which game it was. I want to say it was after the Minneapolis Miracle game where everyone was still just buzzing a little bit. They, instead of doing their one-on-ones with the media where they would have their availability, they actually did their interview together, and it was hilarious. But I'm pulling for him, and I really think he's a solid fantasy play this week.
Yeah, I think that is a hell of a snag. That's a guy that So I play fantasy, and typically I'm a lot more in depth with it. But I'm not in it. I'm not in any money leagues this year, so I'm a lot more casual. Like, kind of check my lineup on Friday to make sure. Not Friday. I check it on like Wednesday night to make sure that it's set, and then kind of go throughout the weekend. But like I'm not like waiting for Monday at midnight to pick up guys off the waiver and make sure that I get that first claim in or anything. So. I mean that's a really good pickup. I would definitely take that advice because, like you said, Kyle Shanahan likes to throw the football to his running backs. Jimmy Garoppolo's not going to be playing, so I think those checkdowns are going to be even more widely used by this offense. And Jerick McKinnon, it doesn't matter who you bring in off the street or out of free agency. Jerick McKinnon knows the system the best. He's going to line up the most in the backfield. So that's a really good pick. That's some deep knowledge, Jack. I'm proud of you, especially since I literally just threw you on the spot completely while we're on the air.
I had to think a little bit about it because I was like, I know I've been trying to pick up some people, and I've started to look into a little bit of DraftKings stuff. Normally, if you were to ask me this question at 11:30 on a Sunday morning, I could probably rattle off 5 to 6 guys for you, but I appreciate you putting me on the spot.
I got to keep you on your toes.
Think on my toes a little bit. And I just want to say here as well, before we get into game predictions, obviously Jordan and myself, we are allowed to do this now. I made sure with Joe Johnson, owner of Vikings territory and everything like that. If you made it this far in the show, we're not going to officially start promoting our podcast sponsorship until next week because it starts on October 1st. But I want to give a little bit of a reward to any of our listeners that have made it this far in the show. We announced last week that Manscaped is sponsoring our podcast, which we're super thrilled about. We will have a little bit more knowledge here in the upcoming weeks because we have started using their products. But I just wanted to give anyone who made it this far into the show a little bit of a brownie point, if you will. Head over to manscaped.com and use the code LOADTHEBOX, capital L, capital B, and get 20% off your purchase.
Absolutely. And Jack, you got your box today. Mine might be, I had it shipped to my parents' house just because, I don't know, that's, the most permanent address I can think of, and I'm trying to move here soon. So, I'm hoping it's there. I'm hoping I can go and get it here, either tonight or tomorrow. But really excited to start using the products, and I'm glad we have our own promo code. That's insane, man.
Super cool.
That's so cool. But, like Jack said, check out Manscaped. And now, let's do game balls. We're not going to talk about last week's game balls. Go check out the Colt show if you haven't. It was really fun. First time we did video on the show. We do have faces.
Fun and depressing at the same time.
Yeah. I legitimately was afraid that we weren't going to be able to do it because I thought Jack was that upset. And I was like, Jack, it's okay. Well,
optimistic Jack is gone.
He's dead. Mike Zimmer shot him in the chest. He's gone forever. But we will do game balls for this week. Has to be a Vikings player, as much as I just want to say, the game ball goes to Derrick Henry, all right? He's going to kill us. He's going to murder us. But my game ball, did I do defense last week? Or offense last week?
You had offense last week, so you'll have defense this week.
I'm going to go ahead and jump on it. I'm going to say if there's going to be a game ball given out on that defense, it's going to go to Eric Kendricks, and it's going to be because he helped stop that running game. And if we hold Derrick Henry to under 100 yards, it is a day one. I don't care what the final score is. If Derrick Henry goes for under 100 yards, I will be proud of the defense because I expect the secondary to be bad. I want to see the run. I want to see us stop the run. We've got veterans there. I know we had Michael Pierce opt out, but you just kind of got to roll with the punches. So if we can hold Derrick Henry to under 100 yards, Eric Kendricks will gladly get my game ball. So that's who I'm going with. Jack, who are you going with?
Yeah, obviously, I think week in and week out, it's Delvin Cook and Adam Thielen are the easy choices. I think Kirk Cousins is coming off probably his worst game in a Vikings jersey, and I'm going to leave all three of those guys off the table because, like I said earlier, this offense has to learn how to utilize the rest of its talent if they want to find any success in the year 2020. I'm going to go out and kind of go out on a limb. I kind of hinted on this earlier, but I'm going to give my game ball to Justin Jefferson this week. He led the team in receiving last week. Maybe his relationship with Kirk Cousins, maybe he's starting to trust him a little bit more. I know that takes some time, limited offseason, no preseason. But this kid can play. We've seen it if you are doubting it, go back and watch his college film. Whenever he gets the ball in his hands, he's a special athlete to watch. And I really think that the Vikings need athletes. They need to utilize their athletes. I mean, they're not even utilizing Dalvin Cook to his full potential. And I think, obviously, opposing defenses are really going to zone in on Adam Thielen. I think that could give Justin Jefferson an opportunity. We saw BC Johnson struggle a little bit last week. I'm all on board Justin Jefferson being wide receiver 2 for this team. I want him to get that chance this weekend. Go out and prove what you're worth and come home with a game ball on Sunday, whether the Vikings win or lose.
I love the pick. I absolutely love the pick. Jack, I'm going to let you keep it rolling. I didn't realize you were taking a drink, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, go ahead and let's just get this game prediction out of the way. How bad do we lose?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those games where the Vikings, they're coming back. They're going to have some desperation because you have to. You're 0-2. And by no means am I going to be shocked if the Vikings somehow win this. I will come out and say that. It just seems like one of those things where the Vikings start 0-2. They have to fight their way back to get 2-2, and then they do that for the rest of the year, and they end up finishing 7-9 or 8-8, miss the playoffs, and we get a draft pick that's like 16th overall. And as unfortunate as that is, I mean, I don't see the Vikings winning this weekend, but like I said, I'm not going to be shocked if it does happen. My score prediction, I have the Tennessee Titans winning. I don't remember the last time I picked against the Vikings, honestly, but I have the Titans coming into US Bank Stadium and winning 27-20, just riding on the back of Derrick Henry. I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to stop him, and I think he is going to run right down our throats.
Yeah, I'm similar path as you. I do think this is a desperate Vikings team. Also, I'm a big believer in looking at spreads of games and reading into it. So, like, when I see that Vegas only has us as a 2.5-point dog, I kind of think to myself, what do they know? Like, what exactly? Like, am I misreading Tennessee completely? Like, I know they just got into a shootout with the Jags, but the Jags don't look like the worst team in the NFL this year. So, like, and it's a division game. It kind of makes sense to have that be a shootout. But it's curious to me why the spread is what it is. But my gut feeling is that Tennessee beats us somewhere in the range of like 28-12 or something like that. I do think this is a big win for Tennessee. I think that they can beat us the same way that the Colts beat us and the same way that the Packers beat us with just ball control. Our offense only gets to see the field for, like 15 minutes. And when they are on the field, they give up a safety and, have like 100 yards of total offense. So I don't have high expectations of this game. I'd love to be pleasantly surprised. I am one of those people that I will be negative about my team, and I would much rather be incorrect and come on the show next week and be like, well, I'm a dummy, but my team did good, than to have my team suck and me be like, I told you so, I told you so. So really excited to see what the Vikings do. I hope they come out with a passion. I know I talked a lot on Sunday about Trevor Lawrence. It'd be awesome if we got him. But like Jack said, I do think this is still a team that could get into that 7 to 8 win range. We just have to get our act together, man. I mean, it's do or die this week, so I think that might be a reason why that spread is only 2.5. But yeah, that's all I have this week. Jack, what else do you got for us, man?
Yeah, we'll just say this too. I mean, the Vikings, they started 2-2 the year that they ended up making it to the NFC Championship game, and we all know the history that happened after that, as unfortunate as it was. But that was a season as well where we saw Sam Bradford come in, and he looked really good against the Saints week 1, and then obviously he gets injured, and Vikings fans they're like, we're doomed. We have Case Keenum. What are we going to do with this guy? Similar to now, they're like, we might as well lose and take our chance at whoever it is. I don't even remember who it was that year, but whatever prospect in the draft that the Vikings needed, there was a lot of people talking about that. And look what happened. The NFL is one of the weirdest sports football is one of the weirdest sports out there, and you truly don't know what's going to happen. There is parity in this sport, so I'm not ready to throw the towel out on the season. I said I'm done being optimistic, and that might be the case because the Vikings have not looked good, and I can see that. They've looked very awful in areas that they've been very good over the last however many years since Mike Zimmer got here. And, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching staff as well, but we've seen Mike Zimmer turn things around in the past. So I am not ready to throw the towel in on the season quite yet. Yes, if the Vikings continue to struggle, it's fun talking about Trevor Lawrence. It's fun talking about Justin Fields. But honestly, we don't know until the season ends if we're going to have that draft pick. So I could see the season going either way. I could see the Vikings finishing 8-8 as well. As unfortunate it kind of pencils us in for having another mediocre draft pick. But I mean, Tom Brady was a 6th-round draft pick too, and he's won 6 Super Bowls. So anything can happen in this game, and you just got to hit on your draft picks.
Yeah, I just have to say, and this is kind of a question, or maybe I'll try and phrase it as a statement. Optimistic Jack lives on. He can't be killed. I was ready for tonight. I was like, yeah, I've finally done it. I've broken Jack Day. He's miserable just like the rest of us now. And then you come in here with yeah, no, we started 2-2 the year we went to the NFC Championship game. Like, what the hell, Jack?
Football's a weird game, man.
It is.
Anything can happen. And there's fans that are ready to throw in the towel. And, I mean, if we lose this game, we start 0-3. I mean, we saw they pulled up the stat. I think it's like 11% of the teams that have started 0-2 have made the playoffs that year. So it's not an easy task by any means, but there's been a lot crazier things to happen in this league.
Definitely. And then one last thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say on tonight's show, or at least I'm going to try to make it the last thing. The year that we did the Case Keenum championship game and all that jazz was the year that Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen all came out. And I remember all season long being like, if Baker Mayfield somehow falls to us, we have to take him. And then he went number 1 overall, and I was like, damn it, because I was a big Baker guy. But yeah, that's the last thing. Skull, manscaped.com. Use the promo code, load the box, capital L, capital B. And Jack, optimistic Jack, I'll let you walk us into the sunset, man.
Yeah, I don't really have any rah-rah speech for the end of this one. I do think, like I said, I think the Vikings are going to lose. They could prove us wrong. They're so banged up, and Tennessee is injured in some key areas as well, but they've been the better football team over the first 2 weeks. But like I said, crazier things have happened, so we'll come to you with another show Sunday evening after the game, and maybe Jordan and I will both be wrong, but at this point, I don't think things are looking too great for the Vikings season, not just this game, but for the Vikings season in general. Having said that, I'll leave that out there. I'm gonna continue loving this team. I know Jordan's gonna continue loving this team, and we're gonna continue doing this show and talking about this show. So try to stay optimistic. I know I myself am not very optimistic, but as always, I'm gonna leave everyone with the skull because that's what we do.